Welcome to the Thriving Farmer Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kilpatrick. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and celebrate sustainable farming. We believe that you can build a profitable, sustainable farm that gives you true farm freedom. Join us as we talk to farmers, innovators, educators, and entrepreneurs to glean their top takeaways in business and life. Hey, Thriving Farmers. Michael Kilpatrick here with another episode of the Thriving Farmer Podcast. And today my guest is Don Adams, who along with his wife Kathy produces 80% of their own food on their homestead, Jazzberry Farm in Taft, Tennessee. They practice permaculture and organic farming, cultivating a variety of crops, raising goats for milk and cheese, and preserving their harvest through freeze drying. Don, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Michael. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and actually you reached out because I think we mentioned in one of our podcasts that we started freeze drying, and you said, hey, Michael, I do a bunch of freeze drying, and I think you do it at markets, or we'll get into that, obviously, where you sell it.
We'll get into that.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the story of how I got the freeze dryer, but I have simply kind of fallen into this, and it has worked very well for me. And my email to you guys was not necessarily to be on the podcast. It was just to offer help to you.
Yeah.
And then your team contacted me, and I thought, well, yeah, I should share this with everybody. Hopefully this is...
Yes, and my time is so busy now that I unfortunately frequently just don't have time for a phone call. So if I can turn it into a podcast, I will.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah.
All right. So Don, talk to us a little bit about like your background. How did you get started in all of this?
I grew up on 48 acres. My parents were Depression-era parents, so they gardened. They didn't exactly farm. My older brother, turned into farming. That comes in my family. He runs 600 or 700 acres and is a traditional row crop farmer. That's not what I wanted to do. I escaped the farm and became a musician band director.
Okay.
And have retired and have bought my own place. I'm kind of a resource depletion guy. I've discovered that, and that makes sense. So Kathy and I try to produce most of our own food, which is one of the purposes. I kind of consider this a homestead as much as a farm, and those terms tend to be interchangeable with people, although they're a little different. But our first goal is to produce our own food. And then secondly, we'll sell the excess and be part of the community.
And you're in Tennessee?
Yes, almost in Alabama.
Okay.
I'm just due north of Huntsville, Alabama, which is the largest city in Alabama. But I'm very rural, which I like.
Okay. All right.
So let's start on the freeze dry stuff. Because I think that's fascinating. And of course, that's why I'm here.
So how did you learn about freeze drying?
I have electric canners, a dehydrator, all those things. I do all those things. I'm an older man, but I'm still kind of technically capable. And so I don't remember exactly where I discovered a freeze dryer, but I discovered it. And as a teacher and retired teacher, I'm not going to go buy a new one. They're expensive. And I'm not going to just make that purchase without some research. So I did research. They were really interesting. A freeze dryer is the most nutritious way to preserve food. It's easy. It's so easy. I mean, I load the freeze dryer, I push a button, I walk away and come back later. It beeps and tells me it's done, and I load it up, and it's good for 20 or 30 years. That's handy because I have a million things to do on my place. All your listeners understand that, I know. So I researched the thing that sold me on the freeze dryer. I watched a video on the company website, and they had an inch-thick pork chop that they had freeze dried, and they just snapped it in half. It was brittle. Moisture, the freeze drying process takes out 98% of the moisture compared to a dehydrator, which takes out 80% of the moisture, which is why it's better preserved. But they snapped it in half.
Interesting.
Just snapped it in half. And then they took another one and soaked it in warm water for 30 minutes and pan fried it.
Yeah.
And they cut into it, and it was beautiful, juicy. It was like it was fresh.
Yeah.
And that right there sold me. That blew my mind.
Yeah.
Because I don't know anything else that can do that. So I found a used one, bought it, started playing. I joined Facebook groups to learn more. What kind of recipes can I do? I don't need to reinvent the wheel because people have already done this. And so started learning things to do freeze dryers and mark some of that. So how I started doing the freeze dried vegetables, I saw on the Facebook groups they were selling candy. And I was a purist and thought, no, I I have a farm. I want to do farm things. And then they talked about how they were selling it at different markets and how it sold, and it was really great. And that piqued my interest.
Yeah.
And so I did some. I freeze dried Skittles were the first thing that people did. And so I did that, and the flavor is fabulous. I mean, I'll tell you why. Um, I think here's my theory. I don't know if anybody's done research. Here's my theory about how this works. Like I said, the freeze dryer pulls out 98% of the moisture. I think that when that much moisture is gone, the flavors become more intense. And I
Okay.
think that's why the candy is so popular. So
Yeah.
I still do some. It brings in people, which is useful, and so I still do some candy. So
Well, and I think it's important to point out, let's say you put in a load of watermelon and then you put in a load of candy, the time difference.
oh yeah, the time difference is humongous, and so your cost, your energy usage is higher. The company, my first freeze dryer is so old I can't upgrade the firmware.
Okay.
So I don't do candy in it. I have three now.
Okay.
Doing the freeze dry business has paid for three freeze dryers, and I'm enclosing a screened in porch and adding power and getting all this stuff out of my house. And we
Yep.
can talk about that some more. Just and streamline my production, and that's really going to be helpful.
Yeah.
Um, but the process takes a long time. It has to freeze the product down to 20 or 30 below, and then after it's reached that point, the vacuum pump kicks in and sucks out the air, and the moisture sublimates, which means the moisture goes directly from ice to water vapor, and the product is never soggy. So that means the product remains its texture, and it keeps more nutrition, which is awesome. That's a slow process. The more moisture there is in the food, the longer it takes. The candy, they've updated their firmware because freeze dried candy is not really frozen, it's only heated and dried. So that's pretty quick.
Yes, like hours instead
Yes,
of days.
yes, definitely. My tomatoes, we'll talk about my tomato chips. They take 48 hours or more. And because there's lots of
Yeah.
moisture in those, and so they just take a while. But they are wonderful. They're really delicious. So I like those.
Yeah.
Um,
So then, all right. So you've got three freeze dryers now. We talked through the machine process, kind of like how the process goes. Because then after you finish the fruit, I think the thing that we've discovered is that as soon as it's done or when it's done, you heat the trays to then pull the product. And you have to bag that product up sometimes within 15 minutes or else it gets moisture back in it, depending
it
on the
will
moisture.
absorb moisture.
Yes. So fast.
And I put a label on my labels on my bags of product that I say that they absorb moisture quickly and they need to be eaten pretty quickly. I have little Ziploc bags, but I don't trust that as much. I think it can still leak some air.
Yeah.
So that goes.
So then talk us through then kind of like the range of things that you do.
Ah, excellent. I do the candies, not a problem. I do some vegetables and desserts that are not mine. I do
Okay.
strawberries. I do strawberries. I go to Sam's and buy strawberries. Kathy and I produce strawberries, but not enough to be commercial. It's just
Okay.
enough for us. And I know you do strawberries, so that might be a value add thing that could really work well for you.
Yeah.
I don't add anything to the strawberries. It intensifies the flavor just as they are, and that's good, and they're popular. I do bananas, and I add a cinnamon maple seasoning. So
Oh,
I do a lot of things like that. That's my value, part of my value add. I go to
okay.
Gordon's Food Service. There's a Gordon's Food Service and a restaurant supplier. And so I can buy spices in bulk. And so I get a cinnamon maple seasoning. I slice up the bananas, put them on a tray, and sprinkle them with the seasoning, and then freeze dry them. So
Yeah.
they come out with a more complex flavor. And
Yeah.
so for me as a seller, adults like that. It's a little healthier choice. I like that. It's more choices for people. I like that. And it's kind of a creative thing, not terribly creative, but kind of
Yeah.
creative. So that's nice. I'll do cheesecakes. I'll just buy cheesecakes, and they're popular. They're crunchy instead of creamy. Okay, the texture's different. Folks like that. Um, so we'll get to some other things. I'll do spicy pickles. A customer suggested those.
Really?
Yes, and I'm operating under the Tennessee cottage laws,
Yep.
and I can't sell pickled items that I pickled, but I buy commercial pickles,
Okay.
dill pickles sliced, and so that's allowed. And then I do the same thing as I did the bananas. I pour them, or I put them in a mixing bowl, and stir in sriracha. And so,
Really?
yes, and so they're spicy pickles, and the demographic that likes that is probably pretty small, but they're very loyal because they're
Yeah.
not going to find that anywhere else. Although after this podcast, they might find it lots of places, but that's okay. A rising tide raises
Yes.
all boats.
Yes.
So hey,
Yeah.
you guys, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a cool thing.
And so it turns
Figs.
into like pickle chips?
Yes, yes. And that's my whole purpose for all of this. All my vegetables become like potato chips. They're not fried, so they're not quite as crunchy, but they're crunchy like a potato chip, and I will add extra flavors, and we'll talk about those as I go down through it.
Yeah. Okay.
We've done figs. Both of us have fig trees, and we had a really cold winter. Uh, a week that was incredibly cold, so my fig has been knocked down to the ground.
Yeah.
So I can't do them this year, but last year I got massive amounts of figs, and we just quartered them and freeze dried them, and they're already sweet, and the freeze dry process intensified the flavor, so they were very sweet and crunchy, a different texture, and
Yeah.
those were very popular. People requested those this year. We didn't have them.
Yeah.
Um, I have done mushrooms. We have shiitake logs.
Yeah.
Kathy logged her place a couple of months ago, and so we did 3 truckloads of shiitake logs. So we'll have more shiitakes for that. And that's not a snack. We'll talk more about the snack in a second. That's not a snack, but people can buy that and store it on the shelf and use that as something. We experimented with one. This one was a failure. And of course, uh, here's a funny quote: the master has failed more than the beginner has tried. So, okay, we'll try things. And that's part of the fun. We'll experiment, we'll try things. If it fails, okay, not a big deal. That's just part of the creative process. So we experimented with what we called margarita chips. We had a Korean melon that reseeded and produced like crazy. Korea, I don't know the other names for it. It's just a small melon. And so we had the Jazzberry test kitchen. I'll say that with a quotes around it.
Okay.
Well, it's not really a test kitchen, but still. And so we sat down and sliced up the melons and had different ingredients around us, and then tried. And these aren't freeze dried; these are just raw. So we tried different things. She had lemon juice, she had lime juice, we had salt, we had some other spices that she had. And the one that we settled on that we liked the most was lime juice and salt.
Okay.
So it had the lime, the acid, it had the salt, and it had the sweetness of the melon.
Yeah.
And we freeze dried that and Kathy called them margarita chips.
Yeah.
They were, they sold okay. They were tough to do.
Okay.
For us, it's difficult to catch the melon at the perfect stage. You know, if you catch it too right, it's too soft, and I don't like the texture of how it comes out freeze dried. If it's still a little green, it's not as sweet. And one customer talked to us and said we thought they would be sweeter. I don't want to add sugar if I can avoid it. And so that one was a tough one, and we've dropped that one. That was one
Gotcha.
that it didn't seem to work. There's a long list of things, so hang in there. I do zucchini with a powdered ranch dressing,
Okay.
and so
Okay.
it's a zucchini chip. It's a healthy chip. I like that. The venues, and we'll talk venues in a bit. The venues, I give out samples if I have enough, and always with the freeze dried vegetables, people are shocked at how good it is. So, there's a zucchini flavor. It's a healthy snack, and then there's a ranch dressing on it. Powdered. You can buy powdered ranch dressing, and I buy it in bulk, and that's a nice extra flavor. An experiment that we're trying right now is green beans with a soy ginger seasoning. I can buy a powdered soy ginger seasoning, and that's pretty popular. We didn't have them yet this year, but somebody messaged one of our markets and asked them to bring it. And the interesting story of that, most of the vegetables we don't have to cook or blanch. I'll tell you about okra and tomatoes in a second because those are the two most popular. I'll save the best for the last. The green beans we had to experiment with a little bit. We did them raw, freeze dried them, added the ginger soy seasoning, freeze dried them. They were terrible. They
Okay.
were terrible. The flavor was not good. They were grassy tasting. And my guess is they needed to be cooked, blanched to stop the enzyme production. So that's my
Oh,
guess.
okay.
That's
Yep.
my guess. They were grassy tasting. We did it again and we blanched them, and it was still slightly grassy. That didn't work. And then we did it a third time and we fully cooked them, and that one worked. So we finally figured
Okay.
that one out. Yeah. And again, it was just experimentation. And so this year we didn't produce enough green beans to do much. We're going to ramp that one up. So that's an interesting one.
Okay. We have a big planting of green beans coming. So then, remind me, did you put any flavoring on those?
The soy ginger seasoning. It's
Soy
just
ginger
one
season.
one powdered seasoning, soy and ginger.
Okay. Okay.
And
Yep.
it is, the brand name is Trade East, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I've heard of that one. Yep.
Okay. And see, we'll just experiment. And it was one of the markets that I sell to, one of the ladies that had that idea. That was excellent. Yeah, definitely try that. And I know you have a farm store. You might just have a freeze dry shelf of different things that will really be helpful. That would be cool. And if you can't sell, if you have an abundance of fresh green beans that don't sell right away, boom, put them in the freeze dryer and they're preserved, which is awesome. Okay, so last two things. Well, it's not the last two, but it's two good ones. The favorite thing that we do, the best-selling thing that we do that people request and that we struggled with this year, that I can tell you the reason for, is okra with a Creole seasoning.
Okay.
We use Tony Chachere's Creole seasoning. There's some others that are probably just as good, but we've had luck with that brand. The other brands are probably fine.
Okay.
We don't cook the okra. We do it raw. I wash it, of course. I do chop up the okra. There are some people I think do it, take off the stem and do it whole. I chop it up for a couple of reasons. One, I think it gives me more surface area to pull out the moisture, so it should freeze dry quicker. The process should be quicker. Two, I can get more in a bag, and that's more customer value, and that's fair to me. I like that part.
Yeah.
And then I think it's more appealing look. And then the last thing that I like to chop it up is my seasoning, I'm going to cover more surface area with my seasoning, and it's going to have more flavor. And I'm all about that. So one of the difficulties of doing the freeze dried vegetables that I've discovered is is the recipe, mixing up the seasoning. How is that going to work? So I have stainless steel bowls. I process my veggies, throw them in there, mix up. To say this to help people, I put in olive oil as a surfactant. If I
Okay.
don't, the seasonings don't stick. And I'll put
Ah.
in the olive oil and mix everything up and get olive oil on everything. Then add my seasonings so that they will stick. Otherwise, after the freeze dry process, all the seasoning falls off, and
And
that
then,
works better.
and you don't feel like and well, obviously it doesn't. The olive oil doesn't still sticky at the end. It just provides just enough to hold it there.
It's just, yes, just enough to hold it there. And I struggle with the recipe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have set recipes. My yields are different every time.
Yeah.
I'm not doing the exact same amount of vegetable every time. Um, but that means that it's harder for me to be consistent with what I'm doing. And I've had batches of okra that were not good, too salty, too spicy, and I wasn't happy with that. So I need to find a way to do that. So what I do right now is season by taste. I season it, I'll just take a bite.
Mm-hmm.
The difficulty of that is I can season by taste, and if I season it to where it really tastes great, when I freeze dry it, that taste is stronger. It's saltier, it's spicier, it's a stronger flavor, and I've over seasoned. It doesn't work anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing for anybody out there that's trying this to be careful of, to pay attention to. Under season when you're doing it, and maybe somebody smarter than me can come up with some recipes and a way to measure the weight and
Mm-hmm.
estimate and calculate. That's something that I need to figure out because I'll have a more consistent product, and that's going to be better for everybody, me included. Um,
Gotcha.
Other stuff that I do. Okay, another favorite. I do cherry tomatoes, and I add seasonings. So
Okay.
last year I did cherry tomatoes with balsamic vinegar, fresh basil, my basil, and garlic salt. And season those up. I was trying to copy bruschetta.
Mm-hmm.
I,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't add the bread or the mozzarella cheese. I wasn't sure how that would freeze dry,
Yeah.
and the bread I can't add in until it's freeze dried maybe anyway because it'd be soggy.
Yeah.
And so that's maybe some more experimentation. But that was a wonderful flavor. That was really popular, and that sold like crazy. The reason I used cherry tomatoes instead of a regular tomato, I figured out that I wanted that skin to hold all the tomato together, and it looks like a chip. Otherwise, it would turn into powder. And I'll talk more about powders in a second. But it's visually appealing. That makes it more visually appealing. It looks like a chip, and that's what I'm trying to do: vegetable chips. So I would do cherry tomatoes. I did. You'll know the name better than me. Mark's Wild Cherry Tomato from Johnny's.
Mats. Mats wild.
Matt's. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. Matt's. I did that one. That one worked okay. Um, I did some smaller cherry tomatoes that were really tough to process. I ended up mashing them with a potato masher and then adding the seasoning. You have to break the skin of anything to be able to pull the moisture out in the freeze dry process. But I didn't like the way they looked. They weren't visually appealing. They didn't look like chips to me, so I wasn't pleased with that. So I've gone to a larger tomato that I think is more visually appealing. It looked like a chip. And then this year, my red tomatoes didn't do well, and I did sun gold. So the sun gold's a sweeter tomato, you know that. Um, and so I didn't think the balsamic vinegar, fresh basil, and garlic salt would work with that. So I went to Gordon's Food Supply and I got a garlic Romano cheese seasoning. and added that, and that worked with that tomato, I think, better than the other seasoning. That is a
Okay.
good flavor. And again, I hand out samples. That's the way to do things at venues. I hand out samples, and it's good, and people don't know it's good until they try it. And
Yeah.
every time you hand out samples, and if it's good, you sell a lot. I can give up a bag or two, and plus, here's marketing stuff. Plus, handing out samples, it's an opportunity for me to talk to people.
Correct.
I can do that. I,
Yeah.
I,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
enjoy doing that. That's part of the fun. So that's excellent right there. And just on a quick side note, make sure I come back to the vegetables. Don't let me leave this too much. In Tennessee, there's a lot of people coming into Tennessee.
Yes. You guys are growing incredibly
After,
rapidly.
yes, and land prices have gone nuts. They have quadrupled or quintupled. It's
Sheesh.
insane. Yeah, I mean seriously. Um, it just blows my mind how expensive land has gotten. Um, because people are coming in from places that are more expensive and they sold their place and they can afford, more here. Okay. So what I see as I talk to people at markets and different venues that I do, people want to homestead. After COVID, we saw supply chains break, and now they want to shorten their supply chain. They want to grow some food. Well, that's how me and Kathy live. Kathy has lived that way her whole life. Man, she can walk into the woods and come back with a meal. She's
Yeah.
impressive. She's really impressive, which is one of the reasons we get along. We both like doing that. So I'll talk to people, hand out samples. That's a way for me to talk to people. As a retired teacher, I can maybe teach them some things. If you look at my website on the resources page, I have links to permaculture things, gardening things, your podcast, different podcasts, Joe Lample's gardening podcast, just trying to teach people because there's an interest in that. Well, okay, on a selfish side, how that's beneficial to me, I've had some of those people come out to my farm. Somebody just come out a couple of days ago, and we walked around, and I said, okay, this I've done, and don't do this. This was a failure. Do this. This worked. And always they go, oh, wow, this is what I want to do. So that's good marketing too for me, you know. So anyway, coming back to my items.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, a couple more items here to do. Those are my vegetables. One of the other things that we've experimented with that we do, and we do it for us, but we also do it for the market. We freeze dry vegetables and make powders. So I'll grow kale and we'll sell kale at the market. We'll sell the pretty kale at the market. And then the kale that's not so pretty, I'll freeze dry it. I'll put it in the blender, grind it into a powder, and we'll keep that and we'll add it to breads and soups and casseroles to add nutrition. And then we'll put it in, I think it's a 2 ounce bottle, and sell that at the market. And it was Kathy's niece, who's a fitness person, and she buys little plastic tubes, maybe 1 ounce of beet powder and different things that she adds to smoothies that she takes. So we can take our less appealing greens, the beets we generally eat. I don't know that we have extra beets. And we freeze dry them, powder them, and then sell them as additive for that. And that's another way to value add my vegetables and use my freeze dryer.
So the pretty vegetables that you freeze dry that need to be in the container or look pretty in the package, that's what you take the nice ones for. But the stuff that looks awful, you could literally just shove it in there, powder it, no one's going to know the difference.
Yeah, exactly. And the nutrition is still there. I don't waste something. It has some value. There's still nutrition. There's still value. And it's an easy way for them to consume. For me, I have a friend that eats pizza and hamburgers. That's his gig. That's his thing. And so somebody like that can take the powder and put kale powder on their pizza. They're not going to taste any kale. It's going to look like, Italian seasoning. add that to whatever and just add some actual nutrition to what you're eating. So I like that part. That makes me feel good, and then people can get some better nutrition than what they're eating. So some failed vegetables that I've done, and somebody else might make these successful, but we didn't have luck. We may try them again. I grew tons of pumpkins. I sell some pumpkins. I have room, and I have 29 acres, so I have room to do different things. Three different gardens, one large and a small one. Anyway, so we tried pumpkin chips. My goal was to put a pumpkin pie spice on them, and that we never sold any. We didn't try to sell them. They just, I don't know. We didn't try to cook them. That may be a thing to do. They weren't as sweet as I thought they would be. We tried sweet potatoes, and that should be sweet. Both of those, we need to experiment with more. That may turn into something, but
Those
they're
are
easy
both
for.
very starchy. They're both very starchy, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know how that would affect the process. I'm not sure how to make use of that. Yeah, so we'll have to experiment with it. Um, I think that covers all the things we've tried. Yeah, you mentioned watermelon that you can do too. I don't know if that's something that's.
It just takes like 3 days because watermelon,
Yeah,
as you know, is full of water. So, in one
yeah,
aspect, it might be worth running it through. Well, actually, what you would do is you'd mix the trays, do like 3 of watermelon and 4 of something else that's way less water. So that because you get too much ice on the inside of your canister, then it
yes,
just doesn't want
yes,
to dry.
yes. And I've tried watermelon before too, and my pieces that were too big did not complete in the middle. So you have to
Correct.
make sure you have a uniform size and
Yes.
a thinner size to work a little quicker. Yeah,
Yes. I
that I
think.
would think that would sell because
Oh,
that's
it
going to be
sells.
incredibly sweet.
It tastes like cotton candy.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's yes, it's very hard to keep that in stock for us. We do melons too, and melons are good, like a cantaloupe, but they don't sell as fast as the watermelon does. That's for sure.
and the watermelon is something people really know.
Correct.
And again,
Yeah.
since that process enhances the flavor, it's going to be an outrageously good flavor. Yeah.
Yeah, and we
Yeah.
take our watermelons that have gone so ripe that they are fit to sell anymore,
Yes.
and one
Yes.
watermelon will fill the entire freeze dryer.
Yeah. And that overripe watermelon is sweeter. And
The
so when you
texture
freeze
is
dry it,
not. Yeah,
yeah, the texture is how does the texture turn out when you freeze dry it?
just crunchy. Just yeah,
It works okay.
it
Okay.
works just fine. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I
But
may try that.
I would say that's probably our number one that we've sold. We also we had extra kefir that went past date, and then we also had peaches, so we kind of combined the two and made a peach kefir thing, and we had to cut it into little pieces. We since bought the little tray dividers, so that next time we would
Yes.
just do dividers.
Yes.
That sold okay. I don't. It's kind of sour, and I like it because I really like
Yeah.
sour things. But I think some people. My wife buys these little tiny, and they were ridiculously expensive for like little snacks for the kids that were literally like this big, a half inch in diameter, and they're called like puffs or something. They're freeze dried, basically like a yogurt bite, and so that's what I was going for with this. Hey garlic lovers, here at the Farm on Central, garlic is one of our staple overwinter crops. We use it in everything: garlic salt, infused honey, fire cider, you name it. But now you can grow your very own garlic straight from our farm to your garden. We offer seed garlic with 3 amazing varieties: Music, German White, and German Red. These guys thrive in zones 2 to 7, and with a little extra care, they'll do great in zones 8 and 9 too. Plus, we've got free shipping on our 1, 3, and 10-pound bags and discounts for bigger orders. Get your seed garlic today at shop.farmoncentral.com and get ready for your own fresh garlic harvest next summer. Happy planting! So I think if we were to, change it up a little bit, I think it could sell really, really well. Because my wife spent a fortune on those when the kids were young.
The freeze dried products are expensive.
Yeah.
And
So let's
there's a
talk
reason
about
for it.
that. Yeah. Talk a little bit about your price range.
I go with It's an 8-ounce by volume bag. You've probably seen the bags on the website. The weight is not 8 ounces because it's freeze dried and it's so much
Correct.
lighter. But
Yeah.
I go with that bag. It's for listeners. It's about a 5-inch by 8-inch bag, gusseted, so the bottom opens up and I can get more volume in there.
Yeah.
I sell those for $9, and
Okay.
then and for me, here's a perspective for you. I'm very rural. This county is maybe 25,000 people. The town is maybe seven. South of me is Huntsville, Alabama, which is the largest, city in Alabama. I could go into Alabama, but I would have to follow the Alabama cottage laws. And I'm going into an urban area, and I could charge more. The prices are always higher in an urban area than rural. My produce here, we do, some vegetables and things at the market. Everybody's got lettuce. Everybody's growing tomatoes. Everybody, it's hard to do. And there are, this is a very agricultural county. There are several farmers doing different, doing markets. I mean, so I'm out competed, which is why I've latched onto the freeze dry because that works for me. But I don't go into Alabama um, because of the different cottage laws. And then I'm going into an urban area, and the restrictions, the regulations are much, much higher than they are for me in a rural area. It's very easy here, and going into an urban area, it's just more bureaucracy. And so I just don't bother. I said earlier, I think I'm retired. Kathy and I are retired. I don't necessarily want to grow the business. For us, it's finding balance between being retired and growing the business. How much do we want to do? That's something we really do struggle with, because man, there's a lot to do on 29 acres. And we live on separate places. We met, but she has 30 acres. I have 29. Um, and neither one of us want to give up our acreage because we've worked on it so hard and done so much. It's hilarious, and I understand. I mean, I've done too much here to want to give it up. So we cooperate and help each other and do those things. But because of the urban versus rural, my prices are cheaper. I think you're a little more urban than I am, so your prices can and should be higher, I would think.
So we're charging about $8.95 for it's 1.25 or 1.5 ounces. But that's about the same size bag that you have. I'm looking on your not your website. Your website, actually, your photos aren't working on your website. So I'm not sure if you're aware of that. You may need to get update your plugins on your WordPress. But on your on your Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Jazzberry Farm, you have a recent picture of your crunchy tomato, sun-gold tomatoes. And that looks about the same size we have. So we probably could go ahead and up our prices, actually, when I see what you're doing.
I was $1 cheaper last year, and a couple of people told me I was too cheap.
Yeah. I
So
definitely
so I
think that
did
you
go
can.
up $1. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have people coming into our place. They're buying 3, 4, 5 bags at a time. So I'm assuming we're not as expensive as we could be. And we obviously ran the numbers. We're making fine on labor. It's just the time. It's just,
Yes.
the amount of time a batch. We wanted to basically be $100 per day out of that freeze dryer is what we want. So if you have something that goes 3 days, now you realize that batch needs to bring $300. So,
Wow. Yeah.
Anyway,
That's a that's a different calculation than mine. I'm calculating my cost per bag and my profit per bag. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, we obviously calculate all that, but then we also try to get at least $100 a day out of that. So then that does make it a little bit more. But yeah, those cherry tomatoes you guys are doing look super cute in the bag. So we're definitely gonna have to try that.
Do that.
Yeah.
They're very popular. Both flavors are good. I think those would be popular for them.
Yeah.
And for me, I calculate my bag cost, and I try to put my electricity cost into that too. I would bet your electricity cost is a little bit higher than mine. I'm with TVA, and so I don't remember my cost per kilowatt, but I bet yours is a little higher than mine. And I make a guess at mine. You
Yeah.
really nail it because your batch times are different. But
Yeah. Well, we ran the numbers on what it should cost a day to run that thing, and it was between $1 and $2 a day, I
yeah,
believe.
yeah,
And so at that point, we were like, now our labor is way more important, and the depreciation is way more important than the electric. So I think that's about as far as we went. I'm sure we could dial it into the penny, but um, yeah, that's kind of where we stopped, I think, on that one.
and the labor cost is higher on the vegetables,
Absolutely.
especially for some of the vegetables. Processing the vegetables, the okra's not too bad.
No.
Wash, chop, season, that's not too bad. For me, the cherry tomatoes have a high processing time. Wash,
Correct.
destem, and then I slice them individually, which is really slow. I haven't come up with a better way. I told you I tried doing a potato masher and
Yeah.
mashing them, and that worked. But to me, just the visual appeal just wasn't the same.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
there's got to be a way to get a blade spinning and then basically the tomato falls down and just gets sliced by the blade. Um, it just needs someone to be able to build that. So,
If you discover that, let me know.
okay,
Yeah,
I definitely
yeah.
will.
Now with the other vegetables, the zucchini, a mandolin slicer, a peel, and then mandolin slicer, and that's fast and easy. That works
Correct.
fine.
Yeah, no,
When we
absolutely.
did the failed attempt of the pumpkins and the sweet potatoes, that was slow. To cut those up, that was pretty slow. So, um, yeah, the with the vegetables, the processing time is a bottleneck in a way for profit because it's more time than you think.
Yeah, let's shift here a little bit to marketing. Talk to us a little bit about kind of like where you're selling this product and kind of like what your marketing has been so far.
Excellent question. Okay, marketing is Facebook for me. Um, my follower group is small, but it works okay. I don't need to be giant, but my marketing is different than other farmers.
Okay.
And here's why. Doing the freeze dried things that I do, I sell as a snack ready to eat.
Mm-hmm.
You do that too. The freeze dried stuff. I don't sell it as food preservation for people to sock away. They're going to be able to get cheaper stuff at the grocery store than what I could sell them freeze dried. And I'll talk about something that we experimented with freeze dried that I just didn't think I could sell into the market at a price that was worth it for me. But since I'm doing snacks, I don't do farmers markets that much. There's one market here in the county that a Main Street group does. They're like a chamber of commerce. They do an excellent job. I absolutely love them. Their communication is good. Their organization is good. We are so lucky to have them. Um, and it is called First Saturday on the Square. It's 7 months, April to October, and it's just the first Saturday. It's not a farmer's market, it's farmers and food trucks and craft and, lots of different things. I think they have 60 to 70 vendors. The lady running it is on the ball, and she subscribes to a service that will monitor cell phone usage and credit card usage. And she told me one time that they had 4,500 people at
Wow.
the. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So that's worth it. That's
Yeah,
worth it to go.
absolutely. Yeah.
If I go to the farmers market here in town, like I said, it's a small town. Maybe 20 or 30 people come.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So and I would sell things. I've gone before and I would sell things, but it's tough to justify that small number. So what I do that's different than other farmers, since my main product, the freeze dried stuff, is
Mm-hmm.
snackable, I do festivals. Everybody nowadays, every town has a strawberry festival, there's a place I just did last week, they have a crepe myrtle festival. Um, there's all festivals, they have food trucks, they have bands that play, they have bouncy houses, and then there are all sorts of vendors. And I go to the festivals, and now we're talking 3,000 people, 5,000 people, 10,000 people.
Yeah.
So my customer base is much bigger than going to the small market. And I love the guys that do it. I'm thrilled that they have the farmers market here in town. I'm not trying to say bad things about them, but for me, economically, it makes sense to go to a festival. Those are my biggest venues, and that's my biggest income is going to the market. Again, I hate to say it, but I do the candies. The candies sell, but what happens is people see the freeze dried, and now freeze dried is recognized enough. It's been out there long enough. People know what it is. When I
Yeah.
first started doing it, I explained the process and I explained it, and people didn't know. And now I don't have to explain anymore. People know. Um, and the high price of that stuff, they understand. Even people are buying freeze dryers and they're saying, yeah, they're expensive and it's difficult, and they understand. So that's not a problem. Um, but people know that at a festival, they're going to walk around and eat stuff and do all the events and things. So maybe they see and they know freeze dried candy because that's more popular than vegetables. All the vendors I
Correct.
see are doing, all the people I see are doing candy, and I'm the
Yeah.
only one I know doing vegetables. So the candy brings people in, then I can give them a sample of tomatoes. I can try this. I can tell the story. And that's my marketing, is me telling the story. Here's what we do, whatever. And I've increased my Facebook audience. I've got people that follow because of that. I've got people that have come to the farm because of I've met them. Um, and yeah, that's my best marketing maneuver right there, is just talking to people, explaining what I do.
Yeah.
They come. And then two, for venues that I sell to, there are two farm stores that I sell to. One is here in town, they're doing the Joel Salatin thing. They do chickens and beef, and that's their gig. And they have a small farm store on the edge of town with their meat, and they're wonderful folks. I love them because they also do a lot of local stuff. Again, local. The desire to do local has grown tremendously, and I love that. So they take all of my freeze dried stuff. In the summer, I sell them a ton of blackberries because I have a giant blackberry patch. There's a hilarious story in that if you want to hear that one. And so I sell clamshells of blackberries there, and I'll sell them gallons of blackberries. And they are also a commercial kitchen and bakery, so
Ah.
they make blackberry cobbler,
Okay.
and
Yep.
then they value add and they resell that, so that's nice. um, I don't take them too many vegetables. There's already some folks that do that, and then like I said, there are already farmers selling vegetables, massive farmers, doing lots of vegetables. So I can't compete with that, but I do some other things besides the freeze dried. That's not they take my pumpkins. This year we're in such a drought. I have no pumpkins. I mean,
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
lost a lot of stuff because it's been so dry. But I would sell pumpkins and gourds and just different things. They're really nice about that. There's another one a little farther away, in the next county, that I sell to, and they're a restaurant, and they do all my freeze dried things. Don't do anything other than freeze dried, and so that's cool.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. And
And
both of
then
them, both of them are awesome.
you also have goats too, right?
Yes. Like I said, the purpose of our place is to feed us first. So we have goats. Kathy milks and makes cheese, which is wonderful. They're Nigerian
Okay.
dwarves, so they don't have the goatiness to them. I don't mind the goatiness, but this is like a cow's milk. So she's gotten good at the cheese. She doesn't think she has, but she's gotten good at the cheese. We don't sell the cheese. That's a
Yeah.
whole nother level of restrictions. And so we don't dance that dance. It's just for
Correct.
us. I had hogs.
Yeah.
I had the Cooney hogs. Like I said, I grew up on the farm and I helped my brother. And so he had cattle when he first started, and he experimented with different things, and then he finally landed on row cropping.
Yeah.
So he had cattle and hogs and did all that. He had cattle, and I remember trying to help him load a bull into a trailer, and crazy, wide-eyed, and I thought, I'm not doing this. It was tough. This is not for me.
Yeah.
He's a little stronger than I am. I'm not going to tell the 2,000-pound bull what to do. So at that point, I decided if I ever do this, I'm going to do smaller animals. Nigerian dwarves, the coonies are a small pig. I can handle that. Easy. Me and a buddy butcher the pigs, you know. But what happened was I ended up with more pigs than I could sell. The coonie has been popular. I've seen it grow, and so there are lots of people around me that has the coonie pig, and so then I couldn't sell piglets. This market was saturated, and so my freezers are full. So what am I going to do with all these pigs? So I made a deal to somebody and got rid of the pigs. I may experiment with sheep because we love lamb. I had a neighbor that I helped with some things, and she does hogs and pigs and all that. She gave me a lamb, and we butchered it, and it's been wonderful. And close to me, I take my goats to an auction, my excessive goats to an auction. And so it's the largest sheep goat auction in the state of Tennessee. So I would have a ready outlet for lamb. And so we could eat a few, we could put some in the freezer, which is the purpose. And then if we have too many, we could do that. I need to do some more fencing. There's another paddock I would like to fence, and then my rotation is easier. So, I have more projects than I'll ever have time or money. Just
Absolutely.
keep plugging away.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, I think that's pretty exhaustive. I mean, there's still more to talk about, but that was pretty exhaustive on the freeze drying. Anything else you'd like to share before we go?
The freeze dry stuff is awesome. If anybody out there can add a revenue stream, the capital cost, the upfront cost is high, but it's not too bad. And for me too, I know Joel Salatin was really good about incubating young folks. There's a candy guy that has an ebook. I bought his ebook. That's excellent. He started doing the candy business for his kids, so that his kids could learn some business. And I wonder, I have no kids, I wonder if the freeze dry process is easy enough that if you have a teenager, man, they could launch into that, and it would be a great way for them to learn business. They're going to be comfortable with the technology. They're going to know what the kids out there want. I think it would be really useful, and it's just a great way for them to experiment and play and have ownership of the business.
So we did regular we tried one batch of regular candy, and then just to test it. And then we tried to do all the organic candies, and the organic candies do not freeze dry.
I wondered, yeah.
They are, like they either blew up and they were just like the weirdest thing ever, or they literally looked like nothing happened to them the entire time.
Some of the people online talk about if a manufacturer changes an ingredient or swaps the ingredients and how much, it can ruin the process.
Yeah, so we'll have to continue to do more research on if there's any slightly healthy ones that we want to do. But yeah, I mean, the Skittles is one of those things, 4 hours and you're done. And
that's great. And it's easy to load.
Yeah, and the amount of money we just basically mathed on that. We were like, oh my gosh, think of how much money we could make.
Yeah. And there are people that's their business. Doing the candies, and that's, good for them. I mean, go for it. So yeah.
Yeah.
Just a last couple of freeze dryer tips for anybody that might be doing this. Your freeze dryer will come with some filters to filter the oil, because you need to get the particulates out.
Yes.
There's also a car filter that you can get to filter it one more step. I filter my oil in 3 steps. I have just one to get out big stuff. I filter it then through the Brita pitcher that comes with the freeze dryer. I think they're still doing that maybe. And then I
Yep.
put it through the oil filter to get another layer of filtration. So I bought, when I first got the freeze dryer, 2 or 3 gallons of vacuum pump oil, and I've never gotten any more because I filter it and it works great.
So how long does it take to filter? Because it took forever for us.
I leave it for a couple of days. I mean, it
Oh, so
takes a
you
while.
just
I
you
just leave
drain
it.
it out and just put brand new oil in and just let it. Okay, all
And
right,
and
that
I
makes
have
way more
enough. I
sense.
have enough oil rotating. I'm rotating oil enough that it's not a
Mm-hmm.
problem. Yeah.
Okay,
So that
gotcha.
works fine. Yeah. Another tip, and for folks doing this, have 2 sets of trays,
Yes.
because what you can do, what I do, maybe my yield of okra is not enough for a full run on the machine. I can process what I have, load the tray, put it in the freezer, and then when the next day or so, when I have another yield of okra, process
Mm-hmm.
that, load the rest of the trays, start a load. So I can keep the machines busy, and my vegetables stay fresh. Um, and well, the other thing about it is that freezing the vegetables in your freezer will shorten the time that they're in the freeze dryer. Because
Mm-hmm.
remember, the freeze dryer is freezing them to start with, and the newer ones, my older one won't do this, but the newer ones have a sensor that are measuring the temperature, and it will be able to get down to temperature quicker. So you save
Mm-hmm.
yourself time by doing that. The last tip, I want to make sure I give people that are trying this tip, make sure you have some kind of scoop. I bought, and I got this from somebody online, I bought a French fry scoop on Amazon. I wish I had it here so I could show you on camera. And it's just a French fry scoop, but the cool thing about it is, it's a funnel. Where it
Mm-hmm.
comes down to is small enough that it fits right in my bag. So I slide my bag on, I scoop, and boom, my bag is just about full. And then I just add a couple. I've got my gloves on, and I add a couple more things, and then boom, I seal it. That's saving me time. And this process can be long, and anything I can do to save time is wonderful. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, that last tip right there was very helpful.
Good deal.
Yes.
I
Yes.
mean, you may find something that's better, but what I'm using is the French fry scoop. Yeah.
Okay, I will be getting on and ordering one. Well, Don, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate you coming on, sharing your expertise. This has been a master class and gives us obviously some ideas for the kitchen. And I'm hoping it will give the folks on the podcast a really good idea of what they could do to kind of increase their income and add another enterprise.
That's it. Exactly. I hope it's helpful for someone.
All right. Thanks so much.
Oh, you bet. Thanks a bunch. Bye.
So there you have it, another episode in the books. So I'd love if you would hop on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. Those mean everything to us. We love to hear what you're thinking. If you have a podcast guest that you can recommend, please pop on over to the Thriving Farmer Podcast website and leave us a review. That's thrivingfarmerpodcast.com.